Is uncertainty keeping you out of the real estate game?
Hi, I'm Kelly Turner from Total Mortgage.
And I'm Sanam Solati Yurczyk with New England Prestige Realty.
And we're here to talk about what is happening in the marketplace right now with housing.
Yeah, there are a lot of shifts going on. And uncertainty is something that we're hearing not only in relationship to like real estate, just with everything in our world today.
I know, our joke this morning was I drink iced chai from Starbucks and all of the Starbucks are currently out of the beverage that I drink due to supply chain issues, which I think is as we move into wintertime, we're going to see a little bit more of those things come up.
Absolutely. So I asked her if my husband offered her some coffee and I'm like, oh, no, she doesn't drink coffee.
I had to pick something else. They were all out.
Yeah.
I think we've seen store shelves kind of get a little bare again in some areas.
Yes.
Some equipment, things like that. Cars are still delayed. People ordering cars.
But I guess the key to all that is to be fluid, right? So you still have a delicious drink. You tried something new.
I do. I tried something new.
You're almost done, so it's pretty good.
It's very good.
So, yeah. So with all the changes in the real estate market, we're getting a lot of people coming and saying, should we buy now? You know, inventory has started to drop a little bit.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that there aren't any homes out there or that it's not a great opportunity.
Yeah, well, and why is it dropping? I think there's a lot of questions for what is happening. Are sellers nervous and they're pulling back? Do they feel like they've missed the market, so they've pulled back? Is the inventory just not there? What are sort of your thoughts on what is happening with inventory at the moment?
I think some of the inventory is just not there. I mean, we've been kind of we've leveled off a little bit, locally at least. And I think sellers are coming to the realization that with a little bit of the hikes in the interest rates, that they need to be a little bit more flexible and they need to respond. They've taken this time to digest the fact that some of the buyers kind of went on the fence and they're on pause, which is really not a good decision when we look at real estate as a whole from the long term. But, from a seller standpoint, it's all about perspective. Even if they are to sell today and they've made the proper price adjustments to cause their home to sell, they're still at an advantage. We're still seeing numbers higher than what they were pre-pandemic.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing with that as well is watching what's happening with price reductions.
Yes.
Because if a house comes on the market priced appropriately, we're still watching those houses fly off.
They are.
The houses that are not priced appropriately, and in the profession, we can kind of peg those usually pretty quickly. Yeah. Those are the ones that we're seeing the price reductions kind of settle into where it probably should have been in the first place. But, the hype, that we had a year ago, that has died down a little bit. You may not see a house go on the market and have, 80 showings in 2 days and get 40 offers. It's still brisk though for a well-priced home.
Yeah. I mean, before the pandemic, most sellers would see on average 1 or 2 offers before they accepted their, prospective buyer. So I see that coming back to being our new norm, which is, I think, great.
Yeah. Well, another thing from the lending standpoint, we are seeing more flexibility from sellers with loan type and product type. During sort of the height of the craze in 2021, cash was king. We were seeing cash offers kind of come in really hot, and then there was a clear hierarchy of loan type that sellers were willing to accept.
Yeah.
And it really stunk for borrowers who were well qualified, but they were maybe just using a different loan product because it fit their needs best, and they were sort of getting pushed out a little bit. And we are absolutely seeing those offers come back into play now, and borrowers who maybe couldn't get the house a year ago absolutely being able to get those homes.
Yeah, they now have an opportunity. There was clearly a number of months where our poor buyers that had FHA type loans, VA loans, chattel loans, they were all at a disadvantage, unfortunately. But I guess the positive with that is that they weren't necessarily competing with a million other offers. Now as a buyer, it's easier to get out there. It's actually more feasible to see a house that comes on the market rather than missing the boat completely, and to have an opportunity to jump into home ownership.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, the big question of what do you do with the uncertainty, right? Is it the right time? I have, because I deal in interest rates, right? Interest rates are high right now. They are compared to the last 2 years.
Yep.
They're not high historically. And I know people sometimes get frustrated with that commentary. Like, yeah, great, rates were 18%, 1%, but houses cost $50,000 in the 80s. It's not a fair comparison. But the percentage of the monthly payment to your income, that really has not changed. So yes, while these interest rates feel uncomfortable, we really just have to focus on what are your housing needs? Does it make sense for you to purchase at the moment? Does it fit in your monthly budget? And then sort of think about the long term. How long do you plan on living in the house? What is your 5-year plan? What is your 10-year plan? Is this a potential investment property down the line? Like, there is so much that comes into play in making a decision on if this is a good time for you to purchase.
Yeah, but really, like, it's unless renting is your alternative, and really, like with rentals, we've talked about this, like over the past 30 years, rental prices have gone up exponentially. Like, they have not dropped. No. And imagine just spending all that money at the end of the year, you have nothing to show for it. We were talking about earlier, like if you bought a house that's $400,000 today and you go to sell it in 5 years, and let's say you're still selling it for the $400,000 price. Like,
people get frustrated and they say, well, I didn't win the real estate game, right? My home's price didn't appreciate. However,
on the surface, it might feel that way.
You paid money for your housing needs towards principal over those 5 years. So when you sell the house, you are still going to get money back out of it in equity. So you essentially paid yourself to live in your house. Yeah. If you rented for the exact same monthly payment for 5 years, the day that you move out, you may be lucky to get a security deposit back of $800. Yeah. You're not getting any equity out of that property. The owner of your home, of your rental, they paid down principal or, whatever they were doing with their investment funds to get there. So, because that's, I think, the big concern that people have, right? The number one concern is what is going to happen with prices. Am I buying a house right now at a high and then we're going to watch it depreciate over time? Because people do go back to the 2008 housing crisis.
But this is not that.
This is not that. Yeah. This is not that. What is happening in the market does not look anything like what happened in 2008. If you speak to economists, forecasters, people in the industry, the sort of storm of events that led to the 2008 housing crisis, none of those are happening right now.
None of those factors are in play.
Yeah. So it's just very different. Could we see housing prices level out a little bit? Potentially. But do we expect to see like a big drop? No. And in fact, we were just looking at some housing data. And what did it talk about for the 5-year appreciation in Harford County?
24.22% of an increase in value. And it's funny, we were talking about it earlier, over the past 30 years for people who've owned homes, right? The value has increased by 300%. That's insane, right? We talk about homes that our grandparents bought for $20,000, $30,000. Yeah. Where can you find a house today for $20,000 or $30,000?
Yeah, now they're purchasing for $200,000, $300,000 the exact same home. And I think the other thing to contemplate as well, and again, it's my encouragement towards borrowers, is your housing needs are not dictated by the market, by interest rates, or anything like that. No. If your family size increased, if your job has moved, if there's just so many things that come into play on, is it a good time for you? Some of it is just you're a first-time home buyer and now is the right time. Because, renting, there are some lenders and realtors that kind of are, you never want to rent. Renting absolutely has space in housing. There are people who need to rent because of economic reasons. There's people who need to rent because maybe they are only going to live somewhere temporarily. Yes. They're not sure what their plan is.
It's a short-term solution. It's not a long-term solution.
That's exactly it is. It's a short-term solution. If you tell me that I'm taking a new job and I think that I'm only going to be there for a year and it's in a new place, I would not recommend purchasing, right? Yeah. Sometimes it makes sense for people, but oftentimes it doesn't. That's where rentals come into play. But if you are working in a stable job, in a stable place, you're going to live here, it almost always, even with today's prices and the current interest rates, if you were to, I'm a math person, amortize that out over time, it would be a financial gain for you.
Absolutely.
To purchase a home.
If you're just not positioned to be able to buy a house now, we actually sit down with clients one-on-one to work on your succession plan. Okay, so now may not be the perfect time, but we know that in the next 6 to 8 or 12 months, this is where we want to be. We can help put you on that path. So you can definitely reach out to us for, one-on-one
One-on-one.
meetings.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it's something that, for especially those first-time home buyers, if you think you are going to be purchasing in the next 5 years, you really should be sitting down with a professional now to talk about what are the options, what can you do to make yourself an attractive purchaser, what sort of things can you do to help. Especially for young adults, like credit is a big question that comes up a lot. How do I help my credit? How do I fix my credit? We can help that right at the beginning, so that way we're not sort of behind the ball later on trying to get it taken care of.
Absolutely. And the reality is, when you compare homeowners to renters, a vast majority of them have 40% more net wealth, because they're investing in themselves, their own real estate. And another reason why it would be good to invest in real estate, they say it can help buffer with all the economic uncertainties. If the market continues to go in a direction that is not that great, at least it's in a stable place. It's in your home. Everybody needs a roof over their head. Mm-hmm. So it's a great buffer.
Yeah, and I think the other, thing to contemplate with that as well is the rental market right now. Even if renting makes sense for you, it is very competitive. It's almost like the flip-flop of the 2021 housing market. In 2021, it was very hard to buy a house.
Yeah.
In 2022, it's very hard to rent
a house. Absolutely.
Renters are often asking, or landlords are often asking, no pets. I had a borrower who I'm helping them buy a house because all the rents they were finding, they needed to make double the rent monthly. Yeah. So the rent is, for this particular property, was 3 times the rent. It wasn't even double. They needed to make 3 times the rent monthly. It's a $2,000 a month rent, so they need to be bringing home $6,000. That's just not reality for a lot of renters. I have a renter with 2 large dogs. She cannot find anywhere to live, so we're going to buy a condo.
Yeah. Landlords have really been in the driver's seat. Like, I actually had a client, and against my advice, they ended up renting the property and paying an entire year's worth of rent up front, which is actually illegal in the state of Connecticut unless it's held in like an escrow account. But they just needed a place. They were desperate. There weren't any properties that matched their criteria, and they ended up moving forward in that direction. But yeah, landlords have been in the driver's seat.
Yeah. So what can you do, right? If you think this is the right housing market for you, what can you do, or what thoughts do we have about setting yourself up for success in the long term?
Yeah. So, talk to your professionals. Make sure that when you're submitting an offer that you're going in strong based on what's happening today. Just because we're seeing some price adjustments, and yes, prices are dropping nominally. That doesn't mean you get to lowball a property unless the property is grossly overpriced. But the reality is we're dealing with people on the other side. So we want to set ourselves up for success.
Absolutely. And I think from the lending standpoint as well, is I have a lot of borrowers say, well, I want to wait until interest rates drop. Well, here's the thing. If we are thinking that there's going to be a large increase in appreciation and value, that means we're not really thinking that home prices are going to be dropping over the next 5 years. So are you better off purchasing now with today's interest rate, and then knowing that when rates drop, you can refinance, but you're already in the home?
Yes.
And your principal is based on what you purchased the home for, not what it's currently worth? Or you're going to wait for home prices to go up 5%, 10%, 15%. Rates might be down, but you may find yourself in the same monthly payment situation. So generally our advice is get in the house that makes sense for you at the moment, especially again, if your housing needs dictate that this is something you should be doing. And then when rates drop, we can refinance.
Yeah. Because guess what? There's always going to be uncertainty. Guess what? When we look at real estate, we're not just focusing on the past 30, 60, 90 days, because it does fluctuate that greatly. We're looking at what's going to happen historically over the next 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. And historically, real estate has proven to be a winner.
Yep, over and over again.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
If you have any ideas for questions that you have, things you'd love to hear us talk about, please let us know. We'd love to entertain your thoughts.
Absolutely. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.